What's going on, everybody? It's Anomaly, and I'm here with what I thought was an interesting little collaboration. First off, my friends, individuals, but the title, a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew. So I want to introduce you to Nabeel Aziz and my buddy Andrew. What's going on, guys?
What's up, man? How are you doing? Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we'll start with Nabeel. Let people know about you, where you're from, and where you live right now, because you're not in America, me and Andrew are.
Yeah, my name is Nabeel Aziz. I'm originally Sri Lankan, and I was born and grew up there. Then I lived in Chicago for about 6 years, and now I live in Dubai.
Okay, I didn't know you even lived in Chicago, so that'll be interesting. I'll have to ask some questions of the pros and cons and differences in lifestyle. Andrew, let people know about you.
Yeah, I grew up in South Florida. Since we're talking about Judaism and religion and all that, I got to tell people I was raised in a conservative synagogue. And I really want people to understand what that means, because the word conservative politically, it means right wing. In Judaism, a conservative synagogue is a synagogue that was essentially founded by atheists. And so the conservative and the reform, that's way to the left. And, I'm coming from a place now, I would never call myself a conservative Jew, when it comes to religion. And that's something I really want to get into on this discussion. I think a lot of people don't understand.
We'll move on. I want to get to Nabeel first. We'll go back to Andrew. We're going to hit some tough stuff. We're going to get together, in a sense, try to nail some tough questions. And Andrew and Nabeel are not snowflakes, so I doubt either one of them is going to scream at me, and I'm not, vice versa. It should be a good time. They're good people. With Nabeel, I want to ask the biggest misconception that you think the West has about Muslims or Islam, and the biggest thing they got right. Because depending, if you listen to a left-winger on what they think Islam is, it ends up just being like what the left wing wants it to be, which I don't think it is. And then if you listen to the right wing, they have a pretty narrow stance on what they think of it. So I want to know what you think they have wrong in the Western world and what you think they have right about your religion.
I think the biggest thing that or the biggest misconception people have about Islam and Muslims in the West, particularly in America, is that Muslims worship Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. He's actually our prophet and messenger. We don't actually worship him; we worship God Almighty. So that's one mistake. I mean, there are so many misconceptions about Islam in terms of anti-Islam rhetoric. Like, okay, the Muslims worship a moon god and all of these misconceptions. But I think the biggest one is, for some reason, people think that Muslims worship Muhammad. That's the most egregious one that I've seen, because Muslims worship God Almighty alone and only Him.
Let's start with
as far as
let's start with the left wing stuff, because how the left winger views Islam. What do you think they got wrong? And then we'll go to the right.
Well, I mean, number one, the biggest thing that the left wing gets wrong about Islam is that they think that they can co-opt us into their POC, intersectionality, minority movement. And while semantically and sort of externally from the features, we are people of color, and there is some intersectionality elements in us. Like the average mainstream Muslim wants nothing to do with the leftist agenda in terms of what they want for society, what they want for social interaction and dynamics, what they want for economies, things of that nature. However, what seems to be happening is that the leftist or the liberal is trying to absorb all of the different minorities into its one whole, like the Borg almost, which they're trying to assimilate us.
And then and then the right wing. What do you think the right wing has incorrect?
I would say what the right wing has incorrect is that Muslims are, for some reason, their enemy, which is really not the case. I think all God fearing, all God knowing, all God conscious people are allies of one another in general, even if we disagree on the specifics. Like for example, Muslims, we believe Islam is a universalist religion. We actually don't believe that all religions are valid or equal. However, in the sense that we are all in this together um, against the godless people, then we have some common ground that we can work towards.
Cool. And I'll get into some stuff specifics with that later. And Andrew, on your note, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about Jewish people in general, or Judaism? Maybe something from the left or the right, politically, and then just socially in general?
Well, from the left, I would say, and I was just talking to a bunch of leftists this weekend. From the left, they seem to be under the delusion that Jews are oppressed in America. You know, some are asking me, "Oh, have you experienced anti-Semitism in America?" Well, my grandmother did. You know, back 60 years ago, some a long time ago. Yeah, there was anti-Semitism. They asked her at her job, like, "Hey, are you a Jew?" And she was fired for being Jewish. That's 60 years ago. You know, nowadays in America, Jews are so well established. If anything, it's good to be a Jew in many different sectors. There's a path, a tribal path to getting a good job. So, Jews are not oppressed in America. America's not anti-Semitic. The president's not anti-Semitic. His daughter is a Jew. So, the left is absolutely absurd with the way they look at Jews as some kind of victim class in America. That's fake news. That's crazy. On the right, you know, I think a lot of people, they're drawing the dots, oh, look at all these Jews in media, Jews in banking. You got the Rothschilds, you got all the banking families, you got all the Jews at CNN. There's a lot of Jews. You say, well, see, it's all a Jewish, everything bad in society, it's all coming from Jews. And I was just talking to E. Michael Jones about this. And, the war in Iraq was not just for Jews. There's a military industrial complex in Israel, just the same as there is in America. There's Dick Cheney, who owns Halliburton. There's Warren Buffett. There's the Rockefellers. There's, the Obamas, the Clintons, Bill Gates. None of these people are Jews, but they all support the military industrial complex just the same as the rest of the globalist cabal that runs the CFR and the Bilderberg Group.
Wait, so you don't like Bill Gates? Are you anti-science, bro?
Actually, I got called anti-Semitic this weekend by a left-wing Jew for pointing out George Soros and his funding of Antifa. And they said that was an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. So just like you said that would happen to me, I've been called the anti-Semite by people that know I'm a Jew. It's just like,
I'm with your anti-Semitism on my platform. I don't host that here. No, I'm just kidding. With both of you, I think it's, a lot of the media types are just awful and dishonest and really wicked people. So, Andrew, I know from your perspective, it's something from the Jewish perspective you just don't hear very often. So the more that gets out there and the more people kind of hear that, people learn and they realize that there are allies that go against the grain. And same with Nabeel. I've been following you for, I think, a year. We've never really spoken. I checked out your interviews the other day, but I was like, man, he's hilarious. And I start seeing the overlaps between, although I'm not Islamic and I'm not Muslim, but, very similar views that we have on society, family, and maybe the ills of the left wing. We'll get into that in a little bit. That'll be fun. But I want to ask Nabeel, what are the differences in Islam, and what's the differences between where you live right now in Dubai and then, like, say, Iran? Because I know here we just learn, I don't know that we learn, but the left, like you said, it's intersectionality. They just literally pretend like you do whatever they do, which obviously is not true. And then on the right wing, they think it's all exactly the same, which is also not true. So what's the differences between your Islam and others?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's only one Islam. However, Muslims can be very different. The vast majority of Muslims are Sunni Muslims. That represents maybe 85% of the Muslim population. A minority of them are Shia, primarily in Iran, but also in Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, and little pockets of other Middle Eastern countries. And after that, there are these very small offshoot heterodox sects, which most people would not consider Muslim. But by and large, Sunnis and Shias, those are the two main Muslim groups. And not to sort of bore you with the religious creedal differences, but the way, for the most part, we believe in the same things, but the way Shias practice their Islam is very, very different from what the way the Sunnis practice their Islam. In fact, in some cases, and there are also sub-factions in the Sunnis and Shias, so it's a very, I'm not doing justice to the discussion because obviously we don't want to make this a whole like Islam 101 class. But the nature of the Shia religion is such that it's very, very different than the Sunni religion. Some of the things that they believe, like we don't believe. And what happens is, because of the societal or political or civil upheaval or unrest in the region for the past however many years, the media, or what popular culture understands as the Sunni and Shia divide, is that we've been killing each other for the past 1400 years, which is really not the case. There have been there has been sort of a conflict for dominance throughout history, where there have been instances where Sunnis have been ruled by Shias in certain kingdoms and so forth, and Shias have been ruled by Sunnis in certain kingdoms and so forth. However, for the most part, there has been, for the most part, sort of like a live and let live, sort of almost a truce. You guys do your thing, we'll do our thing.
Do you think like people will say they're oppressed in Iran, women are oppressed, gays are oppressed, or you're Nabeel, come be free? What do you think about that? The conceptions of that between the two? I know they're different, but do you think that's overhyped, or you think there's validity?
What I would say is that Muslim people in general are religious people, and they want to be able to be free to practice their religion. What happens is you have the governments impose a certain way of Islam on the people, and that is not necessarily organic. You can actually force people to practice Islam a certain way. Even if you try, what will happen is that you just get hypocrisy. So, like if we take Iran for an example, Iran, Persian people are generally more on the secular side of the Muslim people in general. They're more inclined to Western ideals and things like that, because they used to be an ally of the West, right, before the revolution happened. And what you see on TV, okay, and this is the problem with a lot of news media. What you see on TV, the people that the news media talk to, okay, are the people who know English, are inclined to talk to Western press and things of that nature. So who are the people who are know English, educated enough to speak well, and are inclined to talk to the press? Mostly Western educated, secular kind of people. So now you're automatically selecting for those kind of people to talk to them. But you're not selecting for the people, the majority of the people who are, they probably don't speak English, they only speak Arabic. They don't want anything to do with foreigners and things like that. So they won't be speaking to the press. and you're ignoring the vast majority of the population. Which is why, for example, when you think about how the Arab Spring happened, and the media went into places like Egypt and they started interviewing people, they thought that, wow, the Egyptians, they're very secular people and they're just looking for freedom and democracy. But what happens when you did give them the elections? They voted for Islamists. So when you leave the Muslim people to their own devices, they will choose Islam, the majority of the Muslim people.
And we're going to get into more of that there, because you're closer to the source, on the ground, whereas the media are some truly wicked people. I mean, they always find someone to fit their agenda. Here, they find the worst of every group. They go to Syria, Libya, flip reality. It's not where you're going to find a nuanced perspective about what people who practice Islam actually want. So we're going to get even into that in depth later. Andrew, on that note, I want to say in America, correct me if I'm wrong, and please fill in the blanks like with my Florida comment. It's just through the grapevine. But a lot of Jewish people are not really practicing Judaism. A lot are secular, and also a lot are ethnic but not religious. You, I believe, are Orthodox, correct? You're practicing.
I'm Orthodox, although if you talk to a lot of the Orthodox, they'll say that I'm a heretic or I'm this or that. There's a guy going off on me just the other day.
You got to get cloaked up and walk 20 blocks on Saturday. No, but what do you jokes aside, but maybe true. They're probably like, you're not going hard enough. But what are your thoughts about the differences in Judaism? You could talk about that from the people who are even more Orthodox than you to the people who are completely secular. And what do you think about the differences? What do you think is the strongest point? And what do you think about the misconceptions? Because I know, even talking to you a lot of people don't really understand anything about Judaism or the Jewish, I guess, differences in beliefs.
Well, the first thing I want to say is there's no one more Orthodox than me. There are people that will stringently follow laws. Like if you go and read the Talmud, you could find thousands of things that it tells you to do. Okay. And some of them are called like signposts. Some of them are called like fences. Like don't do this so you don't get to this point. Don't do this so you don't get to this point. And they're obsessed with all the little things and they're missing the spirit, what everything is all about. And so there's a lot of people, Ali likes to call them legalists. That's exactly right. There's a lot of legalists that think they are the most Orthodox because they're like this and they make sure not to do anything outside of this, but they're missing the spirit of the entire thing. And so a lot of Orthodox are like that. And I had a big debate with a friend of a friend. A friend of mine, I tried to encourage him to take Kabbalah classes. Kabbalah is the deepest understanding of the Torah. And I tried to encourage a friend of mine to take these classes. And he said, well, this other Orthodox friend of mine, he says that what you're studying is not legitimate. It's like heretical or whatever. And so I said, put him on the phone with me. Let's talk it out. Let's see what he has to say. And for over an hour, I spent time going over every single one of the things that he thought we were doing wrong. I explained to him why he's wrong, why he doesn't know what he's talking about. And at the end of the conversation, he said, my friend should go and study Kabbalah where I study. Yeah, you go take a class. He's right. So a lot of times there's misconceptions, even in the Orthodox, they don't know because at the highest levels, a lot of times, the people running their place, they're doing things out of ego, out of ignorance, desire for power, whatever. If the Orthodox Jews had their salt, if they had everything together, they would be talking about Rav Ashlag, who warned the Jews before the Holocaust, if you don't share the Zohar, there's going to be a Holocaust. They'd be talking about my teacher, Rav Berg, who the only reason the world knows the words Kabbalah and Zohar is he shared the Zohar with the world. He shared Kabbalah at a time where the religious in Israel were beating him up for sharing it with people that, he's sharing it with people that aren't 40 years old, people that aren't men, people that aren't, chosen by a specific teacher. They were beating him up in Israel for this stuff. And, people don't understand, like even in the Orthodox community, things aren't all well and good and together. And that's before you get to, that's why so many people left and became conservative and reform. They're doing things with, I got to do all these rules, but they have no spirit. So they just leave. And that's, I grew up in I understood that they were teaching me Judaism as if it were fairy tales because they didn't believe in it. But at the same time, eventually, after studying all kinds of different, spiritual paths, I was brought back to this place. So I'm not somebody that came from this like, oh, I'm so religious. No, I found the positive energy.
Got you. It's similar to, I think, in the Christian faith in the Catholic Church. If you go to an LGBT liberal church and you go to a Baptist church by like Pastor Anderson or something, it's a night and day. It's not even similar. And what you're talking about, and we can maybe get into it a little bit later, is there's obviously the Torah, there's the Talmud, and then there's the Zohar. You're very bullish on the Zohar, correct?
The Zohar is the book that will unite humanity. There's no doubt about it. It is the Ark of the Covenant of our generation. It's what we need. It's the light of God in a physical form.
And before we get to Nabeel again, I want to ask you, what do you think of, obviously in the Orthodox community and in the different sects of the studying different texts and maybe highlighting certain parts and not highlighting certain parts? What do you think about the secular Jewish community, which seems to be the majority in America, the ethnically Jewish, but maybe secular religious-wise? Yeah, and can you hear me, Andrew?
Oh, I thought you were asking Nabeel first.
Oh, no, I'm asking you. I'm saying I'm going to him next, but I'm just saying, what do you think about that community as far as like, and is it the majority?
You mean the Reform and the Conservative and all that?
I'm talking about, say, like someone who says, oh, I'm not religious. I'm like, they're not into like maybe the Judaism aspect of it, but they're ethnically Jewish.
So in America, I would say maybe 60%. I don't know. It's definitely more than half of Jews in America are secular, liberal, and I have a friend that says he's culturally Jewish. What does that mean? That means that on Hanukkah, he gets he doesn't even get a menorah. He just goes to a dinner party. You know what I mean? On Rosh Hashanah, maybe he goes and sees his mom. They're not observing anything whatsoever. They might as well be celebrating Thanksgiving. It has no ties to anything. They don't believe in God. And it leads to destruction. The same as, like you say, the churches that'll do drag queen story time or whatever.
So what you're saying is you put in all the hard work with the Zohar all year, and they come around 7 days a year and just steal all your goodies. That's what you're trying to say.
They don't even get anything out of it. I wish they still got the light from doing what they do. They get nothing, and I'm sad for them.
I hear you, brother. On that note, Nabeel, I want to ask you about Islam. What do you think they got right? Because, I follow you and I love your takes on everything. And it's interesting to see how much we really align, although we have two different religions, on a lot of stances when it comes to like very key issues in how to, raise a society. So why do you think Islam is right when it comes to family, women, society, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. I think we've been talking. Me and Andrew have been talking too much. So let me just flip it around. What are some of your beliefs, Anomaly? Like you're a Christian, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about what you believe?
Yeah, I definitely. I grew up Catholic, so I grew up as a Catholic. I got baptized. I went through it, but my family was not very religious. It was kind of just like going through the motions, and we eventually fell out of it. And then I became a hardcore atheist. I read Richard Dawkins, and I had the book, and I'm like, God's fake, spaghetti monster. I went through the whole 9. I was dark, nothing is real, hell is real. I'm yelling at Christian kids in school, just like rebelling intensely. Then I went to high school and college and started getting like spiritual, realizing something else was out there. And then it eventually led me back to God, I would say in really around 2016, 2017, being more conservative, learning about stuff, and then just being surrounded by a lot of good Christian people who just kind of, said, come here, check this out, watching how our country was really happening and who was standing up for the right things. So then I just, started becoming more Christian. I'm not the most researched. I'm still reading the Bible and getting into it. But as far as accepting Christ and just realizing my place, that's been my journey. And, this year I really hope to dive into the entire text and read other texts as well. I really want to understand through my own lens what everybody's thinking rather than just hear second word. But for me, I've really felt a strong connection over the last 3 years, which has really shifted my, my trajectory.
And what sort of um, other than like maybe going to church on a Sunday, what sort of practices do you engage in, like religious practices? Because I know like Andrew probably observes the Shabbat, and Muslims, we pray 5 times a day. Like what sort of I mean, what's required of you, or what do you do personally? I mean, if it's private, obviously you don't have to mention it,
No,
but
no, no, for
I just want to
sure.
understand.
I would say definitely more prayers and trying to get away from sins and get closer to what's right. And I think that's really, to be quite honest, is a big problem in Christianity in America, but maybe in the world, is that, it's really been weakened and dumbed down over the past couple hundred years, to where the institutions are not as strong. It's out of the schools. It's out of a lot of families. And, because I'm so new to it, there's still things that I would like to improve on, as far as not even just habits, but lifestyles. And, a lot of the goals of it are things that I'm still lacking in. So, it's definitely a very loose set, especially out here. Depending where you go or who you hang out with, it's a very loose set of rules, to some. But it's something that I think the more I get into it, the more I realize the stricter is probably the better way to go. But I'm still, I think, far away from my goal as a man and a Christian and a human being.
Yeah, I think we all have a long way to go. Jocko Willink. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy's work. He's a former Navy SEAL. He wrote a book on leadership, and he's got his own podcast, Jocko Podcast. He says this thing called discipline equals freedom, and that thread, like even if you're not religious, if you come to it from a sincere place of inquiry, like everybody comes to it, all like the great masters. Like if you look at like Musashi, the Japanese samurai who wrote this book in Japan, like a thousand plus years ago, like Zen masters or whoever it is, like even like an artist in France or whatever, writers, like anybody who thinks about it deeply, they come to this like conclusion, which is like discipline equals freedom. And that is almost the essence of Islam, is discipline equals freedom. And when you ask me, what did Islam get right? And it's this actually. It's like through submission to our Creator, we achieve safety, security, and happiness in this life and the next life. And that is our purpose of existence, is to submit our souls to our Creator in whatever way that is required of us. And that's, I think, the main thing that Islam gets right. And I'm not too familiar with other religions, so I don't know to what extent this is required of other religions. So maybe you guys can enlighten me as far as Christianity and Judaism goes.
Yeah, I wanted to say too, with the discipline is freedom. It's brilliant. And I think I've reached a point recently, reflecting on my life and kind of reflecting on how others act and how our country has seen a whole kind of cultural shift off of like confusion and chaos. It's really led to me to look at when I was younger, when I was maybe atheist or just kind of dooming and glooming and stuff, the emptiness and where it really led from, as far as, was it true intelligence or was it like lack of self-esteem and other things kind of playing a role mixed with like curiosity. And then I kind of got to the point of self-awareness, and that helped me even before I really dove into biblical stuff, looking at Taoist stuff and mindset type people like Jocko talk about this stuff. And you start to realize self-awareness is the first step, because everybody's not perfect. You're still going to make mistakes. However, if you're aware of that, that becomes a whole thing. And I heard you kind of touch on it, Nabeel, in an interview I was listening to. And to build on that, a lot of people nowadays, it's not just that they're making mistakes, sinning, or doing what I remember you called appetite, like sexual appetite. Maybe it's, literal appetite, but they're identifying as that. So if I'm not going to say sinning is a great idea, but if you're self-aware of it and you're working on it and you're striving to be better, it's a lot different from identifying as your sin or identifying as your mistake or appetite and making that your entire identity. And I think that's why culturally we're spiraling immensely. And even in a country that was or is a majority Christian, you saw the Christian church and the Catholic church get laxer on the discipline, to the point where I've had to do a whole rediscovery at the age of 30 into even figuring out what it is. And the people who really preach it from a discipline level are called extremists and, you know, really torn down. And the more liberal ones who really don't follow anything. And at that point, you know, similar to a secular person studying Judaism, it's like, what do you, you know, how much is it even in? So I thought that was brilliant. And, you know, I guess, Andrew, for you and your religion, you could build on that as far as what you're disciplined to do or what it tells you to do, and how that's really, you know, the answer.
So where I study, everything is about restriction, meaning that you don't just go for what you want. You know, there's two filaments to a light bulb, right? Two poles to a light bulb, the right, the left, and that central column, the filament in the light bulb, is what creates the electricity. It's what creates the energy. It's the restriction. So, you know, sometimes you want to shout at somebody. You need to restrict. You know, it's not about your ego. It's not necessarily about what you're gonna give that person. You need to be able to make sure you're doing the right thing at all times. So, you know, it's been said that, you know, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism are like the three columns of the world, really. Where Islam is like Nabeel says, it's all about submission, peaceful submission to God. And Christianity, there's a lot about free will and choosing God, exercising your free will to choose God. And Judaism is like in the middle. It's like we definitely, if you listen to a bunch of Jews talk, you'll get 10 different opinions. It's about expressing our free will, but at the same time, you have to be disciplined. You have to do your 3 prayers a day. You know, if you go talk to a liberal Jew, whatever, he doesn't even know what the word shachrit is. You know, the guy calling me an anti-Semite doesn't know the word shachrit. It's a prayer that we're supposed to do in the morning for an hour every morning, you know, and they don't even know what these words are. So there's a lot that we need to discipline ourselves.
Do you do it every morning or no?
Every morning.
Okay, so you're on it. Yeah, I think in general, even in the Bible, I mean, there's consequences for certain actions, you know. So it is maybe a lot of free will, but I think it is a lot of discipline and submission as well. You could ask me a question too, Nabeel, if you want, but I wanted to ask you about, you know, the family and, you know, what you see maybe going on there, and from Chicago or being in Chicago, like, what do you know, the pros and cons of how they're doing it where you're at now and how they did it in Chicago?
And when I was there, it was in I think I got there in 2000, so this was long before like the craziness happened in America. You know, it was before I was there during 9/11, but it was when I got there, it was before 9/11, and the country that I lived in, or the city that I lived in, I don't think it's the same city anymore. So I mean, what I noticed was I mean, things were much more like normal in Chicago compared to, you know, what they are now with the craziness, you know, with the protests and, you know, the social justice warriors and all of these things. So I mean, with regard to the family, the thing about the family is that I think one of the great mistakes, the great lies that has been told by the West is that the individual is the unit of society, the fundamental unit of society. In reality, it's the family that is the fundamental unit of society. And it is families as individual units of society coming together that through which you're able to create a happy, safe, and healthy community. And this idea that you must express your individuality at all costs without any responsibility, without having to face any consequences for those expressions. I think is deeply wrong. Because human beings are social creatures, and we have um, social contracts with each other, and it is those social contracts that actually, and it's not the state, it is those social contracts that keep society cohesive, peaceful, safe, productive, happy, and all of those things. And I think what we're seeing now is that because of this expression of individuality, people are opting out of the social contract. Um, America is a fine example. They're saying, okay, no, we're not in this social contract anymore. It's every man for himself, and everybody's trying to get his, which is why you see, what's going on in the country today.
Do you think it's random, or do you think it's kind of planned? Because I kind of, I talk to so many people. Some think it's a theory, some think it's not. But you look at what they're doing, from splitting up the man and the woman. All of their activist groups really push, Marxist, leftist type of agenda of separating the family, the man from the woman, the sexualities from each other. And then even with the COVID-19 shutdown, very suspicious that, social creatures such as ourselves are now forced to not see each other for months, and the negative effects of staying inside, not exercising, going to the gym. Do you think all of this is random and just like a natural progression of maybe a failed ideology, or do you think it's more sinister?
I think I think there may be both aspects to it. Um, there has to be like a top down approach where there must be some sort of plan, for control. Otherwise, why would all of this be happening right now? Because the more atomized you can make people, the more apart you can keep them from each other, the easier they are to control. Like if you watch um, like a lion hunting, like they don't like run into the middle of the herd. They always go and like run down the straggler, the guy who's separate from the pack, the one who's too young, can't run as fast as the adults, or he's too old, or he's sick, or he's injured. Um, so the more they're able to separate us from each other, the easier we are to control through, um, you know, like if we take us as men, for example, by keeping us fed on, garbage food, Netflix all day, every day, pornography, just focusing on, chasing women, things of that nature. Um, and also on top of that, changing the definition or the meaning of what it means to be a man through propaganda, through the media, and whatnot. All of these things together, now you've created a man that is not really a man anymore. And who protects society? Who protects the women and the children? It's men. Okay. And once you don't have the men around to protect society, now you can do with society what you want.
Andrew, what do you think about all this stuff that's going on? You think it's random, or you think it's more sinister?
Oh, it's definitely planned. The feminist agenda, for one, was to take women out of the home into the workplace. That's the destruction of the family right there. Women pursuing careers instead of families. Meanwhile, they could start a family and have their career later, but instead, no, go to university, go get plowed by 10 guys at a frat house. Don't settle down with a husband that loves you. Destroy your ability to pair bond with a man that'll love you for the rest of your life. And go into the corporate world where you'll be miserable. So it's definitely been an agenda. I wanted to note, while Nabeel was talking, he sounded like so many things of what he was saying, talking about, the man is the light for the family. He sounds to me like a great Christian that I love, Jesse Lee Peterson. So one thing I love about this conversation, there's just so much between, the major religions, the real religions of the world, where we love God. I mean, God's given us the same messages in maybe a little bit different forms, but it's all about the family. It's all about love of God, taking care of people. And we get divided and distracted by the media. like Nabeel was talking about, divide and conquer. It's not just, divide the family, which is absolutely, if you can break up that atom, that's like nuclear destruction, but it's also dividing, Christians and Muslims and Jews and blacks and whites and Republicans and Democrats. If you talk to Democrats, a lot of them right now, they weren't fans of Obama. They didn't think he went after Wall Street, this and that, but at the same time, they're fighting. They hate Republic. They've been divided from reality and common sense and their fellow man. There's no reason that they should be against, somebody working in a factory or working as a trucker versus the banker that, bankrupted maybe their family, that sent people they know off to war. There's no reason for all these divisions except the media. The Rav Berg that founded the Kabbalah Center, Billy Phillips asked him one time, why don't more people connect to the Zohar? Why don't more people connect to God? And he said, people are brainwashed. And it all starts with the media. Obviously, bad people in the religious institutions don't help, and bad people in education don't help. But I think the media is one of the number one sources of just everybody being divided and brainwashed. That's why it's been my mission to just take down this corporate media and build up a new structure where we can get good messages to the people.
Enemy of the people.
I saw this video. I don't know if you guys saw it. It was going around on Twitter and Instagram of G. Edward Griffin talking, I believe in the 60s or something, about, the communist agenda to separate the races in this country, start fires, and it just was crazy accurate with what's going on. And you see they're just in a full-fledged push in America, at least, and the West, to just go way overboard on all this stuff. And when you break it down like you both did, as far as separating the man from the woman, weakening the man, leaving you alone, and then striking, it goes hand in hand with what he was saying, even with police and military, same strategy, separate to take down. On that note, and Andrew, I wanted to ask you, I think the, maybe disdain for Jewish people in America, I think from the left wing, it comes from people just not liking white people or lighter skinned people. So they don't even see you as your own entity. They just think, well, successful, own something, light skin, they got to go, or like they got to move out of the way. So there's a lot of obviously hate building up on the left. I mean, it's mostly love. I'm not trying to like frame it as it's this crazy thing. But on the right, obviously a lot of people maybe take it too far. And I wanted to say, with media and all this stuff, just kind of wanted to get your take on it. Like, a lot of people in media are Jewish at the heads of it. And if you say that, a lot of people, like they said, they'll call you anti-Semitic, they'll call someone black racist. These people are just kind of overboard with the numbers. But I was reading the other day, I saw 50% of Democratic funds are from Jewish donors, 25% Republicans are. You have Soros on the left, Adelson on the right. I see it as many things, some positive in the sense of like good families, smart, know how to be successful. And, what do you say to people who say that? Because there obviously are statistics where it's like massive amounts of that is coming from people who are Jewish.
Yeah, I mean, Jewish people are lightning rods for money, for all kinds of things. We discussed it on the stream with Owen Benjamin. He tried to ask me what is a Jew. The characteristic that defines a Jew to me, I've heard E. Michael Jones try and say it's the revolutionary spirit. You could call it what you want. It's a ton of desire. There's an old joke. What's a Jewish woman's favorite wine? It's, I want a Mercedes. Just big desire, big desire. I want a lot, And so if you have a big desire, God wants to give you everything. So if you're asking, God's going to give you more, and sometimes if it's ego and hubris, God's going to give you more to your own downfall, like the Weinsteins in Hollywood, those type of people. But nonetheless, desire will get you more and more and more. As far as why the left hates, or starting to show real hatred of Jews, they look at Israel the same way they look at America. It's colonization. Oh, there's a downtrodden, there's an oppressor and an oppressed. And anybody that's successful, it's like, we got to take down the successful for our Marxist revolution. If you're not part of the Marxist revolution, we need to take you down. And Jews don't quite fit into their, oppression idea, because we're such a extreme minority in America. Why are we doing so well? If America is anti-Semitic, if America hates, religious minorities or racial minorities, however you want to classify Jews, why are Jews doing so well in America? It doesn't make sense for their oppression pyramid game. And so we're colonizers now in Israel. They hate us. If they can use us as a weapon against Trump and say that he's anti-Semitic, then we're useful idiots, and they love that. Yeah, be a useful idiot for Marxism, please. And lots of evil Jews help create Marxism. So there's a lot going on there.
No, it's a fair answer. I appreciate it. I wanted to say, yeah, on that note, you're, a good friend, a good person. I really appreciate you. But you see in even right-wing media, the Shapiro types and even the Pragers, even the Christian, more Zionist people who aren't even Jewish, where they almost like, it's not even that you should blame a certain religion, but they almost go out of their way to just not accept any sort of criticism and self-accountability in their own circles. And I think similar to like how you're saying with where he ran around with the Zohar saying, this is going to lead to bad situations. Why do you think there's so little self-accountability, or maybe people like yourself in the Jewish community that will not be like a total turn against your own people type, but be like, hey, like what are we doing here with this type of stuff?
These are the people I despise more than anybody. Okay, these are the people, the Ben Shapiros of the world. These type of people, they are literal ethno-supremacists. They believe that they are special, not just for being a Jew, for being an Ashkenazi Jew. This is a certain type of people. I don't know for a fact that this is what Ben Shapiro believes, but this brand of people, they think that being Ashkenazi Jew, not just Jew, because there's Sephardic Jews in Bulgaria, there's Sephardic Jews in Morocco, which isn't a race, by the way. That's a whole other conversation. But they think that there's...
I'm more into like the speech stuff, because that if you like yourself and stuff, I don't even hate that. Obviously you should respect other people too, but like it's the,
But this is what I'm getting at. This is why they won't call. This is why they won't call anything out. They think they have a divine mandate, the same way that the guys in Germany used to think of themselves as a master race. They think of themselves that way. And so you're not going to call out anybody on your team. That's my team. He's above reproach. They even will try and cite the Torah and say, oh, you can't say anything bad about a Jew. That's not, you can call out public figures doing wrong. Okay, but it's a big club. It's all for Jews to win. And to be honest, these people, they don't care about Jews. Ben Shapiro will throw Laura Loomer under the bus. Okay, Ben Shapiro doesn't care about Jews. These are people that are about ego and power, and they cloak it in religion, just like you'll see other religion. E. Michael Jones was telling me all about Catholics that did him dirty. Why did they do that? All he was doing was standing up against abortion. I would think Catholics would be stand up against abortion, but they threw them out of their halls of power. Why? Because they want to be in the halls of power.
There's a lot of wicked, and this isn't for me to decide, it's for God to decide, but you could just tell with a lot of these churches and political op Christians, a lot of institutions, I think, in America have been infiltrated on that side as well. And you have a lot of fake gatekeepers and active, or gatekeepers out there kind of just not doing the Lord's work. I guess, Nabeel, if you have any other questions, I know you're chilling, but any commentary or stuff, or I'll keep it rolling.
No, I'm good, man. We can keep going.
Yeah, I guess my question for you is, and this will go for Andrew too, but I want to hear your perspective, Nabeel. Do you think, because there's a big debate in America, the intersectionality. I love the fact that you could come to Chicago, Andrew, me, all my friends of all different ethnicities, we can hang out, have a good time. It's a beautiful thing, but you also see the downfalls of when you can't unite under a single goal, which I think the right wing tries to do, but the left wing just won't have it. They won't pick a certain America or a goal that we all believe in to unite. So there's a lot of division. My question is, Nabeel, with Christianity, with Islam, with Judaism, Hinduism, Taoism, all this stuff, do you think that they can, freely operate throughout the world and just everybody could just mix and mingle? Or do you think it's smarter to, keep it separate in some ways?
I think that it's better for the different groups to to interact with each other, but still have separate communities. Like it's like all the it's like more like we need to go back to being tribes again. So I don't think it's working that, you know, everybody is like mixed in this kind of biryani that we have right now, where your identity is defined by some imaginary lines on a map that somebody drew, and then suddenly, you know, you're all, for example, American, even though there's like 100 different cultures and 100 different ethnicities and so many different languages that are spoken in your country, and then suddenly you're all American. I think that is actually part of the um, I don't know what you want to call it. We can talk about the globalist agenda or the global homo or you know, the satanic agenda or whatever it is. Um, it's to remove that natural innate identity that you have and replace it with something else that can be used to control you. Naturally, people are tribal. Naturally, people are going to stick with their own. That doesn't mean we're going to always be fighting. Okay, we can all you know, live together and work together, but you know, we need to be in our own tribes, because when you're with your tribe, then you're more likely to to want to cooperate, to be charitable, to look out for people within your tribe. And each tribe's got to do that for each other, as opposed to what we have now, where um, anomaly, like even though, you know, you know, we're friends or whatever, like technically you're not in my tribe. Like if like if for example we have an entire block full of Sri Lankans and anomaly moves in, it's going to be weird because he's like the odd man out. You know what I'm saying? Whereas we can have a friendly, cordial, civil relationships with other communities while still maintaining our sovereignty and our ability to interact and mingle with our own tribe. And I think that's probably the what you're going to see happen more and more. And you're starting to see it online more and more, where because online um, you can go find your people and you can build your echo chamber, as it were. And you interact with those people and you can build your tribe online, because people who generally have the same sort of viewpoints will tend to congregate. And I think what you're going to start seeing is those online little echo chambers are going to translate into offline. People are going to start to build communities where it's going to be like you know, right-wing Twitter is going to, you know, buy like a town in America somewhere, and they're going to just all hang out there, you know. And money Twitter is going to be on one side of America, and they're just going to do like drop shipping and e-commerce and shit like that. You know what I'm saying? I think that's what's going to happen.
I hear you. I'm already on it. Like I'm tapped out at the city. It's been a good run, God bless. But I found a conservative spot. I look for a top two, right wing area. Not even, it's all love to everybody, but I go there. It's clean, it's nice, it's safe. People respect themselves and the community, and it's a lot better than a degenerate Sodom and Gomorrah style area where nobody even respects themselves or their community, and they just scream about things on Twitter. So I'm pretty much tapped out. Andrew, on that note, what do you think about, with the different tribes? You're from America, or at least as far as I know, you've been in Florida and then all over. We're here. He has the luxury of, and a lot of people in America feel that way and get called either a black extremist, a white supremacist, whatever. They got a name for everybody, but we're for the most part stuck here. What do we do from here as far as where we're at? And do you see some validity to what he's talking about?
What he's talking about is an inevitability. It's happening. You're seeing, first of all, just the exodus from California and New York. So people are like, okay, it's insane here. I'm leaving. I'm going to Florida. I'm going to Texas. I'm going to Arizona, whatever. So you're seeing people leave California and New York. So who's going to be left? You're going to have the most insane people, and they're going to have their Sodom and Gomorrah community. you know? And then out of the people that are moving to these states, you're going to see more people want community. We want to have a real community. Right now, all my neighbors, they're basically anonymous, and I prefer it that way because I'm sure that the more I talk to them, they would hate me for what I believe more than likely. Even in a red state, even a fairly red city, you know, people would not be so kindly towards me. So I think people are going to start building communities. They're going to find their tribes in different ways. I think that what Nabeel was saying, you know, I think that's a great idea, starting with religion. The community should be built around the church or the mosque or the temple, whatever, you know, it should start there. If you want to, you know, have people that are specifically in your, you know, your culture or whatever, that can work too. But I think everything's got to start with the church. And I think one of the things that he's talking about, like, um, money Twitter or total like MAGA, like genius Twitter, like literally what he's describing, Ali Alexander is working on building right now. So that stuff is happening. And that's a different kind of tribe too, just people that are high energy and positive. Because you could have Christians, you know, that are really good and all good people, but they might not see things the same kind of way. It's not going to vibe just right. If you have people that are all very high energy and think the same way, you might not all need to go to the same church. You could be different religions, but the community would still be functioning at a very high level just because everybody's at the same level of high energy, seeing things the same way. Like this conversation, we might not be in the same tribes religiously, but we're definitely in the same tribe when it comes to high energy and intelligence.
On that note, high energy Andrew, you know, we've had chats, we've drank coffee, we've made plays. Nabeel, you know, they don't want you to win out here in the left-wing media. They want to tell us that you're out here protesting with the Marxists, that you're the same thing as, you know, Dwayne Wade's family or whatever, and such. No disrespect, but you know, they want to tell you that, and then they really don't want in the even right-wing media. Doesn't seem like Islam and right-wingers, you know, they want really to be a good match. Although there's obviously differences religiously, socially, and such. You know, what do you think about the right wing in America? What do you think about Trump in America?
I mean, see, there are different factions of the, you know, the right wing. There are some factions of the right wing where they have sort of like this fetishism for Islam and Muslims because like we were able to conserve our religious values and our society and our community. So they're like, you know, we need white Sharia. Uh, and I mean, there was this meme that went around where they were like, Islam is right about women, which is actually a factual statement. It is right about women. But I mean, we have a certain faction of the right wing that understands, okay, you know, guys, we got something wrong here. There's something wrong. There's something off about what's going on around here. And what is it that the Muslims and Islam is doing that they are protected from this? Like if you look at that story that went about that happened in England recently, where there was a school where primarily like the vast majority of the students were Pakistani, you know, Muslim background, and one of the teachers wanted to introduce some sort of LGBT curriculum, and there was a massive protest that happened because of that. And those Muslims that were protesting, they were not just fighting for themselves; they were fighting for all of us, because as a parent, I should have the right to choose what my child is exposed to and when I want to expose them to it. I shouldn't have to worry about when I send my children to school that they're going to be exposed to a drag queen story hour or you know, my two dads or some other LGBT curriculum or some you know, video training about how to have anal sex, like that article that was in Teen Vogue. Um, Me, I mean, I'm sort of protected from this because we homeschool our children. But I think more and more, what we going to have is people, individuals who are high energy, high vibration individuals who are sort of, you know, woke, opt out of these systems and, you know, start to homeschool more. Say that, okay, we know we're not down for this. And with the right wing, there's sort of like this natural alliance, even though like it's like have you seen that meme where you have the white guy that's like a Confederate? He's got the Confederate shirt on, and then there's the black guy who's like the Pan African, the Black Panther type, and they've got they're fist bumping each other. It's like separate, but they're all moving in the same direction.
Absolutely.
So it's like, I don't have to say that you're my ideological equal or whatever that is if you're a right winger and you're a Catholic or a Protestant or whatever. But we have the same goals for society, in the sense that we don't want society to be degenerate. We want society to be happy and healthy and whole. So in that common goal, we can work together.
Absolutely. And I always mention that on two fronts. One, I bring up that story in the UK a lot to show people the counter, because they always, a lot of times on the right, think negative things. And I'm like, guys, you got to step up. I'm trying to rally the troops. I'm like, how come they're a minority in this country putting this agenda to shame, and you're a majority in this country and you can't even stop it? Like, what's going on here? And I always kind of stand up for the Islamic world in the sense of like, you got American leaders on the right and the left trying to go to Palestine and Iran and make it gayer. And I just say no disrespect, but like, if we can't even control our own country, we have to control ourselves before we can spread love to the world. If we're trying to give them a seed of that while we're doing exploitation of children stuff with that, that's a curse, not a blessing at that point. So, because that's a right-wing talking point. They say Palestine isn't even gay enough. And I'm like, Charlie, why are you trying to go to Palestine? Like, fix America and make sure that the LGBT community is not exploiting children, and then have a conversation about it. But if you can't control, which we clearly can't. I mean, SpongeBob had a gay thing the other day, and it's like, listen, when you're that young, you're not thinking about man, woman, sex. So you're bringing, what is it to be gay? It's to be attracted to the other sex. You're bringing sexual stuff to the children. I mean, this is on mainstream television. These are sick puppies out here. Andrew, if you wanna hop
They're doing it on purpose. I mean, they're obviously doing it on purpose. Nickelodeon, they've had a high-profile pedophile working for them for many years. His name is Dan Schneider. It's an open secret. There's pedophiles in Hollywood, disproportionately Jewish. I'm going to say that because I know the commenters are freaking. Say that they're Jews. Yes, they're disproportionately Jewish. Yes.
But YouTube, we might get some comments. Facebook, it should be good. But go ahead.
Yes, it's fine to say that. The one thing I don't like when people say is they say, "Oh, it's all Jews," or "See, every single time." No, not every single time. You get like the Penn State football coach, or you'll get like Jimmy Savile in England. Lots of high-profile pedophiles, not Jews. Yes, call it out. Say it's disproportionately Jewish. I want people to call that out because that leads people to a conversation where I can help a lot and destroy a lot of myths, things people aren't allowed to talk about, whatever. Yeah. But when you cross the line and say too far, oh, it's every time, then you can be used against your own movements and by the left. See, these people are hateful. See, blah, blah. It's just more division. We got to be real precise with what we're doing because we're in a real war of words, and that's what these people do. They use words to, Black Lives Matter. Why did they choose that phrase? Because, well, if you're against them, you're against Black lives. You got to be real careful with your words with these people because it's about convincing the mindless masses. Most people, I mean, George Carlin used to talk about, think of the average man. How smart is the average man? That means half of the world's population is not even as smart as that. They're below average. So we're trying to reach, the people in this room talking to, like the three of us, real smart. The people listening to us, mostly pretty smart. A lot of people that will never be able to sit and have this attention span for this conversation, not real smart. And we got to be able to convince we need a lot of people on our side. So we got to speak real clearly. I think I went off the point a little bit though.
No, you're good. On the percentage point, when you're talking about that, you're an honest man, and it's like you said, they're defiling the dictionary vocabulary to the sense of, if I walk into a NASCAR event, I'm not going to act like it's all Black people. Like, it's clearly going to be a lot of white people there. So it's like this, you know, statistics are racist and noticing patterns is racist. It's just goofy, especially when in America now there's certain groups that it's just open season, blame them for everything, and other groups you can't. So people like you, Andrew, I think are doing a great justice to, you know, anti-Semitism, and it's the ADL and these other groups that are overly sensitive, and even a lot of, you know, right-wingers who I think use it politically and socially and don't really understand how they're actually throwing people under the bus. So, you know, I think you do a great service there, and you're underrated and undercredited, but I'll give you credit. So that counts. You can't cash it out at Wawa, but you know, it might work in the future for some clout or something. But Nabeel, on that note, what do you think of Trump? You know, they don't want us to win out here, but yeah, what do you think of Donald J. Trump? As Jesse Lee Peterson calls him, the great white hope.
Amazing. No, I mean, so Trump. I mean, I'm a Trump fan. I've read his books, you know, The Art of the Deal and Think Big and Kick Ass. However, like recently, he seems to be coming off real weak with regard to his actions during the coronavirus lockdown. Like, even though he did a few things right, mostly like he cucked basically, and he's cucking on the protests as well. I mean, like, okay, like enough tweets, bro. Like, do something. You know, like you're tweeting law and order. Like who cares? You know, like people are getting killed out there. You know.
I hear you.
So I mean, doesn't it the more he tweets now, it just makes him seem weak. And I mean, I used to think that his polarity and his the extreme reactions that he forces from people was a good thing, and I think it was a good thing to help him get elected. But now I think that it's difficult to have a president who can lead when there's so many people, maybe even half of the population, that, you know, hates him. And it's not just like just the regular mainstream people, it's like other politicians as well, other people in leadership. And because of the way the online game is right now, they'll be trolling him and shitposting him and clapping back and all of those things. I don't think it doesn't work so well anymore. That controversy. It's like too many people have a very bad opinion of him, and it makes it difficult for him to lead or have that aura of leadership among, you know, the masses of the people.
I hear you. Yeah, the COVID thing really disappointed me on many levels, and I was one of the people outspoken about it. A lot of people got upset, but I was like, guys, we get what we deserve at a certain point. You know, even on a religious aspect, I always say to people who are upset at whoever, you can't blame Islam, you can't blame Judaism, you can't even blame Nancy Pelosi. You got to blame yourself and your own institutions for letting you down over decades. Your own leaders of your own country who sold you out and didn't prioritize you second, third, fourth, or not at all. You know, took money from any country or any industry. So it's like, and even now I see a big problem within the Trump movement. I actually talked about it today, was like, he really bulldozed in a lot of ways and broke the chains. But at a certain point, just expecting him to save the whole world is kind of selfish, because it's like clearly during the COVID and now he either can't do anything because our government's set in a certain way that he doesn't have the authority, or he just won't, or, you know, and I think it's a lot of he almost can't, like they almost have his hands tied. So it's going to have to come from us, but there's millions of right wingers, I think, that are just like waiting for him to just bust open Pandora's box, and maybe he'll do it. Maybe he has some tricks up his sleeve. But overall, this year really showed us in America that we knew the Democrats didn't have our back, but the Republicans are either weak or sold out. And really, you know, the cities are going to probably face some turmoil for a while. And we'll see how the country acts, because we have the Second Amendment here. We have a lot of tough, strong people. And right now, I think they're hunkering down, just waiting to see what happens. But I know law enforcement, military, Second Amendment owners, the more stable people in this country are all not feeling this stuff. But luckily, they're also very nice. And I think comparing maybe the Western world to the Islamic world, kindness is not, it can be weakness, and being too nice can be foolish sometime. And we're on the threshold of that, where it's like, are we being nice or are we being foolish? And I think there's some questions to ask there. Andrew, how are you feeling over there, King?
I think we need more table flipping Jesus and less turn the other cheek Jesus. There's a lot of Christians that are like, oh, you can't do it. You can't. I like Ali leading the charge for the Christians and saying, hey, there's laws in this country. You have rights. You don't have to let people desecrate your church, desecrate things. There are laws that you can use in your own defense. And frankly, Trump gets me so upset. Like you're saying, law and order, law and order. You're the basically chief, law enforcement officer for the entire country. Are you enforcing the law? Are you doing anything? And no, the answer is no. And the reason he's not doing anything, and Mike Cernovich has tweeted about this, and I knew this, instinctively without him saying it, he's listening to bad advisors, people like his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner, who also is, I believe, making people anti-Semitic, because every time Trump's going to do something good, like, oh, I'm going to shut down the borders, everybody. And then Jared Kushner's whispering in his ear, no, don't do that. And Trump's like, I'm not going to do that, actually. And then it's like,
He's listening to Jews.
Yeah. We find out it was Jared Kushner, like in the movie, the second Lord of the Rings movie, like the little Grima Wormtongue, the little slippery, snake in the king's ear telling him, no, don't do the right thing. That's Jared Kushner. When Trump was elected, the way Trump, from everything I've heard, and I've read, Team of Vipers by Cliff Sims, who used to work in the Trump administration, everything that you hear out of the people that have worked around Trump, when he wants to do something, he asks like the 5 people around him, like, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And that room used to have people like Corey Lewandowski. It had people like Steve Bannon. It had people like, Cliff Sims or whoever else. It had a lot of voices that they were the people that tilled the soil and made it possible for Trump to get elected. And you look around that room these days, they're all gone. It's people that he put in there from the RNC that tried to knife him in the back every single day until he got elected. And then they begged him for a job and he hired them all. He didn't give anything to anybody that worked their asses off to elect him. And now he's asking them for advice. They tried to knife him in the back every single day. And now he goes to them for advice. Jared Kushner is a Democrat. Why are you asking a Democrat what you should do? Nobody that voted for you wanted you because of your Democrat son-in-law. I wish Jared and Ivanka would go back to New York. I've said several times, they are probably the worst thing about the Trump administration. And he had Bolton and McMaster, and Kushner and Ivanka are probably the worst thing.
Yeah, it's tricky too, because a lot of the right wing, obviously they love him because he's the craziest, coolest person that the right wing's probably ever seen in modern history. But I think a lot of them have gotten complacent, and really you see at the tops of it, gatekeepers who stop people who go to those realms and start criticizing those people and start labeling them extreme or too far, where in reality, that those are the forces that would maybe drag the right wing closer to where Trump started, whereas the left wing lets their fringe run rampant, so they drag the whole party left. And you have people like Mike Pence, nice Christian man, but like he thinks he's going to get brownie points for tweeting about Juneteenth. It's like, bro, they're never going to like you. You could pander as much as you want, but like there's not a single Black Lives Matter activist who's like, you know what, that Mike Pence, Trump's getting my vote because of him. They hate you, bro. So it's like at a certain point, we're going to have to learn the hard way. Nabeel, how you feeling? Anybody else? I don't have too many more questions, so I'll let you guys, anything you're feeling for the last few minutes.
I've seen you anomaly in your interaction with the Trump people, and it's like there's some of them that are like the early Trump supporters, like the guys who saw Trump like in the beginning. Like they're the only ones who are like, yo, this guy needs to change something or fix something. And like the bandwagon people, like the sheep, they're like, okay, whatever Trump says is the gospel. And like even with the COVID thing, I was expecting more MAGA people to be like, to sort of stand up for themselves and not be willing to be, herded like cattle. But that I don't think that was the case, and I saw that in a lot of your interactions on Twitter, not just on the COVID issue, but also on the protest issue.
Yeah, it's tricky because people really rally behind him, and I don't want to steal his thunder. I'm not trying to get attention, or like people perceive it as I'm like a backstabber. A lot of people are into these theories where they're like, anomaly, don't say that, he's got it under control. But you get what you're a product of what you allow. And like you said, I mean, in Texas they had Shelley Luther, this woman who was brave and got arrested and got bailed out. Ted Cruz helped her, got money, GoFundMe. I tell people there's rewards, not that it needs to be financial, but everyone's afraid and cowardly. Good people in this world, God will bless you, and good people will bless you if you stand up for yourself. It took one middle-aged woman did it, and like everyone else just flopped. And it is disappointing. But that's what we're trying to change. And obviously it's gonna happen quicker than ever now that this stuff's happening. Like the truth is gonna fade in. And like you said, people are gonna get more tribal and also realize the things that they've been saying are extreme are really not that extreme. I mean, there are angry, nasty people. They do exist on all sides. But these conversations about race, religion, gender, sexuality, they've been one-sided for the last 10 years. And they say you're a name if you go the other way, but they don't age well. So the two options I see are like the cities, people are going to move away. It's going to turn into Sodom and Gomorrah more than it's ever been. And they're going to blame everyone until everyone leaves, and they're going to be by themselves. And eventually there's going to be a strong leader who's going to take over. Whether it's in Seattle, it's like some random guy who's got a gun, or on a bigger scale, like the left thinks Trump's that bad. Like to us, they've seen this stream. When it's out, you'll see it. We're not bad or mean or angry people at all, but like Trump's not even that far right at all. Like you've said he is, but like the real person who's going to straighten this country out and who's going to rise to power in 5-10 years at this rate is going to make Trump look like, the little Debbie snack lady. Like, no, I'm not making fun of him, but he's not that bad. He's actually just like super nice out and pretty reasonable. So at a certain point when things get worse, I think it's going to give rise to a lot more leaders who are like ready to just be no nonsense, because that's certainly what our country needs. And in the Christian religion, I think we've been clearly like just destroyed and weakened. And I mean, you talk to some of these pastors and some of these churches out here, and you're just like, bro, where's this come from? Like I don't even, there's no law, there's no rule. It's like at this point might as well just be like a Chuck E. Cheese. But how you feeling, Andrew?
Yeah, you're nailing it. There's no doubt about any of this stuff. I don't honestly. The politics right now is such a black hole because the psyops are all out there. The globalists, whatever you want to call them, they're playing all the cards in their deck because Trump was destroying them. There was a point in time before this coronavirus stuff, whatever, where Trump was getting win after win after win. Everything was just rolling in. We had big victories. And they started panicking, freaking out. Okay, they put Biden up in the primaries. He's obviously like a zombie, can't talk, can't debate Trump. So they got to pull every demonic card that they have that they've been working on. They've been prepping for this pandemic stuff, plandemic, for decades. They've been putting this, they've been putting the juice in the water, whatever, to get people ready for this stuff for a long time. They've been tilling the Black Lives Matter soil for a long time. They're pulling out every dirty card in their deck because Trump was going to trounce them, and we were on our way up. So I think, we got to know, I've seen people like Cernovich, Adam Townsend, they predict that Trump's going to lose. I'll tell you straight up, Trump is going to win. That doesn't mean we need to sit on our laurels, do nothing. We need to do our utmost. But I'll tell you from the people I listen to that have been calling things from a spiritual perspective for a long time, Trump's going to win. I know Trump's going to win from my own spirit. Trump's going to win, but we need to do a lot to push things in the right direction. What we don't need to do is get sucked into the psyops in the news. We need to do more high energy stuff. Things like this stream lead to more, understanding, more high energy, people talking about things at a different level. We had such high vibrations on this talk that just the sound waves of this stream are going to help people heal themselves and like be able to be into a different space. We need to give people positive energy, and that's what's going to create the change at the real starting level. You know, obviously all this political stuff, we got to get into it. We got to get into the nitty gritty, but it all starts from channeling the light of God, having high vibrations, being good to people, and doing our utmost to really, you know, share positive energy however we can, especially, you know, something like this. I know you're going to title it a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew. This is something very powerful for a lot of people that, you know, they're being divided by the media, and instead we're going to have unity. And there's nothing more powerful than unity. And people see that, you know, there's the spirit of God with a godly Muslim like Nabeel, a spirit of God with a godly Christian like you, and the spirit of God with a good Jew like me. You know, there's a lot of power in this type of unity. I know I'm just talking and talking, but I'm so happy with what's happening on this stream. This is the energy that we need.
Preach, brother. Nabeel, I have a question just out of curiosity. Dubai, how do they feel about America in general? Like us, the people, the music, the women? What's the word on the street out there?
Dubai loves America. I mean, the Gulf, the people in the Gulf Arab people, they're generally very favorable to the West. The local Arabs, most of them are educated in Western universities. The international schools that they go to when they're growing up, most of their teachers are, you know, American or British or Canadian. So they grow up immersed in Western culture, the good and the bad of it. One of my goals is in some of the work that I do is to highlight the bad aspects or the degenerate aspects of Western culture. So, you know, to make people aware, okay, like you can take the good stuff, but leave the bad stuff out. So what's happening, and what I like to say is that, you know, the Muslim world is about 5 to 10 years behind the Western world in terms of their socio-political discourse. So now we're starting to see over here a lot of this, you know, third wave feminist stuff going on, LGBT promotion going on, SJW type stuff happening.
Sorry,
people talking about, you know,
we apologize.
yeah, people talking about like systemic racism and microaggressions and stuff. When, like, this is all imported from America. Like, Dubai has no history, 400-year history of slavery or anything like that. Like it's the importing foreign conversations and trying to sort of trying they imported a different pieces from a different jigsaw puzzle, and they're trying to stick them in another set. You know what I'm saying? So that's, you know, one of my goals with my activity is to, you know, to draw awareness to this, because there's a lot of people who are, you know, Western educated. Most of the millennial generation. I think, you know, with the Zoomers, it'll be a little bit better. That they're importing this conversation and these concerns where it's totally out of place in our cultures.
I have two questions on that note. One, do you think you'll be able to fight it off and you know, keep your culture, or do you think Western propaganda is too strong, or degenerate propaganda is too strong? And then the second question I wanted to ask is, I know like Islam is a very dedicated religion with the prayers, with the lifestyle. You know, it's very disciplined. Does everybody really follow discipline, or do you find a lot of people have trouble because it's so you know, it's so much discipline?
What I think, to answer your first question, is I think people are going to try to slow it, but I don't think it can be stopped. And it's not that I believe that it is superior or more powerful than our systems or our thinking. It's just that this is prophecy. And in our end times prophecies, we understand that as time goes on, the closer we get to the day of judgment, the world and people as a whole will become more and more degenerate and more godless. However, that doesn't prevent us or stop us from trying to slow it down or stop it where we can, because when we see evil, we should call it out. And if we can change it with our hands, we should change it with our hands. Or at the very least, if we're powerless against it, we should at least hate it in our hearts.
Mm.
So that's the first question. And with regard to Islam, okay, there's almost 2 billion Muslims around the world. Islam has certain obligations in it, and a few people do abide by those obligations, but you find a large variety of practice within the Muslim population. So there are good Muslims and there are bad Muslims. There are religious practicing Muslims and there are people who are just Muslim in name only, similar to how you have in the Christian faith and the Jewish faith. There is a push by the globalists and the Satanists to try to make Muslims more like have a kind of a reformation. They want us to be more like the Reformed Jews and the progressive Christians who are, Christian in name only. It's much slower with Islam and Muslims because the religious features of Islam prevent that from happening. It is happening, but it's happening much, much slower. It's happening more in the sense of they're not able to change the religion. They are able to influence the Muslim people with propaganda, with popular culture, with degeneracy and filth.
Mm. And it's tricky here too, because you were saying the Satanists and the globalists are bringing that over, and that's the paradox we have in this country. Is like you have the left-wing Democrats, and you could see how wicked they've become and what they're doing. But then on the right, you have the neocons, the rhinos, as they call them, or a lot of these mainstream Zionists, and they're bringing that stuff to you guys as well. It's not just the left wing. Like Charlie Kirk and Trump would bring you guys like LGBT stuff like tomorrow. So it's like, and here it's happening as well, where you have both parties. The left is, it's kind of like your built-in feature of Islam is preventing it. Ours is kind of like Christians and conservatives, although it's just to a slower extent, because even that's been watered down so much throughout our system throughout the last 50 years. But that's what I find myself in general. And I know even Andrew in his own way, calling out your own, where it's like, you're not trying to, ruffle any feathers or something. But if you see certain people in certain places, whether it be Kushner, Shapiro, whoever, and you're just like, listen, I know you guys want to believe that guy's going to lead you to the right place. But if you see where they're coming from and who's really running the show, you're like, you're going to get to that bad place you don't want to go just like 5 years later. Or in this case, it happened in like 3 months. I'm thinking like, man, 2030 is going to get nuts. And then like 2020 it happened. I'm like, well, I guess I figured out how they're going to do all this stuff. It took them 2 months to destroy the whole country. I thought this was going to take 15 years. So, that's the unfortunate part about our political system at this moment. But there's a lot of good people fighting back. Andrew, how you feeling?
I'm willing to go a little bit deep in some areas that people watching this, they might not have some interest off the bat, but I wanted to talk to Nabeel about Sufi Islam and his thoughts about whether that's what type of Islam that is. If that's like some people say it's like a spiritual Islam. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
So Sufi Islam, that's another thing that a lot of people have misconceptions about. Sufi Islam is thought of as some sort of more relaxed, spiritual, not very strict and by the book practice of Islam, where it's more like a hippie kind of Islam, where that is more palatable and favorable to the West, just the way that a lot of Western people will gravitate towards, like yoga and those kinds of Hare Krishna type, communities. In actuality, the Sufi Muslim is one of the most conservative and strictest practicing Muslims. To achieve that level of spirituality that the Sufi Muslim strives to achieve, is it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of dedication and a lot of worship, and a lot of adherence to the rulings of Islam, and a lot of doing good deeds, and a lot of staying away from sins as much as possible. And the nature of Sufism, or the goal of Sufism, is that they reach a state where you want to reach a state where you're worshiping God in your life as if you can see him in front of you. And if you can't see him in front of you, to know that at least he can see you. You know, it's like how do you behave, like when you're a kid? How do you behave when your parents are in the room versus how do you behave when they're not in the room with you? And if you know, if God was in front of you, which he isn't because he's transcendent, and not in his creation, if God was in front of you, how would you behave? Would you would you be sliding in that chick's DMs, that sort of thing?
Hold on, let me delete this real quick. Hold on, let me delete that DM. I'm listening.
So that's the highest aim, is to achieve that level of God consciousness and God-fearingness. And that doesn't happen except through a lifetime of worship, which is the complete opposite of what people think Sufis are.
That is almost exactly how I would describe a Kabbalist. That's exactly how I would describe a Kabbalist. And what you're saying, seeing God in front of you, that's exactly a lecture that my teacher, Michael Berg, was talking about the other day. There's so much in common with the three, you could call them monotheistic, three Abrahamic religions, however you want to call them. We have so much in common that people don't understand. And that's why I always want to talk to people like E. Michael Jones or whoever, because, when you delve deeply into the roots of our faiths, there's so much there. Like, one thing I wanted to ask Anomaly before we started this that I wrote down is, his thoughts on the papal cross. Because I asked E. Michael Jones about it, and even he was like, what are you talking about? The Pope's triple cross. There's a cross, the papal cross that popes have had for centuries, where it's not the one T. It's got 3 bars on it. Why is there a different cross that the Pope carries? And when you look at this cross, it lines up exactly with the Kabbalistic tree of life. And the Kabbalistic tree of life talks about 10 dimensions to reality, which quantum physics has finally discovered. They're way behind. The science is always behind religion. They're behind religion. They think they're in front, but they're behind, and they're catching up. When you read the Zohar and you study the stuff that they read in the Enlightenment, they're catching up to us. But, they finally discovered there's 10 dimensions to reality. We know the names of them, and that makes up the Kabbalistic tree of life. And the early Christians, Saint Ephraim the Syrian, he would say, the tree of life, the cross is the tree of life, which gave life to our race, talking about Christians. And there's just so much in there when you look at the deep study of Kabbalah that especially is in Christianity more than, like, when you look at what's in there. I just wanted to ask Anomaly what your thoughts are on that, like the fact that the Pope's triple cross lines up exactly with the Kabbalistic tree of life.
Let me say two things real quick. One, I just wanted to give a shout out to E. Michael Jones because his books got banned on Amazon today. So I've never read any of his books personally, but I enjoyed the combo between you and him. Owen's talked to him, and he seemed like a nice guy that just has said a lot of things I never heard. Never want to see someone get their books banned on Amazon, so kind of bummed about that. But I'm sure people will support in other things. Second thing I want to say before I answered that was off of what you guys said, what you were saying about Sufi and what you were saying about your teachers, Andrew, is similar to what I was saying earlier, where like the rejection of God or the rejection of religion and that's one thing. Going further left would be like the reveling in your, appetites or desires or sins and like just becoming that, which is why these people are aging so horribly. They're not only rejecting God, they're also just taking things that are not desirable or should be private and making that their identity. And then you have the acceptance of God. And then at that point, where do you go from there? Where I think for me, for you, and even for Andrew, the goal is to get closer to it, closer to the word, closer to the truth, closer to the discipline. And that should, that's the key is like, no one can be perfect, but if you can, like you were saying, think about God watching you instead of just understanding. That's where I'm 30 now. That's where I hope to be by the time, I'm 40, 50. Hopefully I'm a wise sage at that point. But you never know, I might mess up. With the tree, I don't know much about symbolism. I mean, I know the cross, I know other symbols, but I'm not familiar with the tree. And even Catholicism kind of confuses me at this point, because you obviously have Christians, you have offshoots, Protestants, Baptists, LGBT churches, whatever. And then you have the Catholics, and then you have the Pope, and then you got their hats and stuff. I'm not quite sure what they're doing, so I'm not the one to talk to. They're kind of confusing me, to be honest.
That's all good, and that's a reasonable answer. A lot of times when people do streams like this, somebody gives an answer of "I don't know." I can't tell you how many times I've been accused, like when I say I don't know about something, what are you hiding? Why won't you make a take? Why won't you say something? And it's something I want to say to the people watching this, because so many times people think they just throw off comments in the YouTube, say this and that and this and that in the comments.
You're a brave guy, though. You go into the lion's den, brother. You go into the most savage corners of the internet of people that are no matter what you say, they're going to be unfavorable. You're a brave man. Even certain streams, I'm like, they might like me, but they still probably wouldn't like me.
Listen,
they're coming for you, bro.
Daniel in the lion's den.
But in the comments, I'm saying, it's like you're in the den.
You got to do it. And the thing I want to say to these people is like, you got to be real. You know what I mean? If you're throwing off these comments, understand what you're doing. You're throwing negativity. There's some people that don't know what they're looking at, and they're reading the comments to try and get an understanding, and you're throwing off some toss-off comment. Do you really mean what you're saying? Are you making a joke? Are you being your worst self? Are you being your best self? Are you acting like God's in front of you? You acting like God's watching you? Or are you just tossing off a comment? Because these streams, no one's paying me for this. I don't get paid for this. I'm doing this to raise consciousness in the world. And every single person watching this, you have the ability to affect what direction all of this goes. You can say, wow, I'm watching this. I watched this really great stream. Let me tell people about it. Let me use it to inspire myself. Let me make a positive comment. Or you could watch this and be like, yeah, F these guys. These guys are idiot, or that guy's an idiot. He's a Jew, so he's a snake, whatever. It's like, dude, who are you helping? What are you contributing to the world by saying stuff like that? I shouldn't go after like random commenters, and I'm talking to a group of people. Most people don't agree with that kind of stuff. But I just want to say to people watching, it's like, you have power. Every single person has power. If you act like you're powerless, I say whatever I want, it doesn't matter. You're affecting people. Everybody needs to check their own energy, because the people around you are getting some of your energy. So don't just toss off negative energy. One of these, I'm just going to say the guy's name. A Fuentes acolyte, one of his friends, is making retarded comments to me today. And it's like, dude, you're leading your followers to destruction, and you're doing it under somewhat the guise of Christianity, because Fuentes talks about Christianity. It's like, you are leading people to destruction, and you're doing it somewhat under the guise of Christianity. You're the worst. You're just like the Ben Shapiro types that I talk about that I can't stand. People that got this loser, destructive energy, stay far away from anybody not trying to talk positivity, high energy. You could feel the vibrations, people. If you're getting negativity from people, don't follow them off a cliff. They're losers. They're freaking losers.
A lot of people with the anonymous accounts try to push my hand as well, where I'm like, how am I going to be you when you don't even want to be you? You don't even got your face there, and you want me to say what you want. So they get a little tough behind closed doors, a lot of them, because their face isn't attached. But also, like you said, this is one thing I love that Jesse Lee Peterson says. You brought him up about the anger and stuff. If you're angry and emotional, a lot of times you get skewed. So if you're mad and upset to an extreme, a lot of times you're not as rational or effective, where it's like, what's your accomplishment? You just trying to get mad, or you have a goal? So that's become a norm. And, hopefully combos like this, and even for me, I know I got a lot of people on all fringes of the right, and a lot of people look at that like bad. Someone said, he's like, do you think these people might follow you? And I'm like, I don't know. I have millions of followers. I don't know who, probably, but isn't that a good thing if they listen to me instead of someone else? Because I'm not lying. So they like that I'm not lying, but then you pair it with something else. You give them what they want to hear. And a lot of them pair it with a certain energy. Like you said, it doesn't fit me or you. And it's not really a way to live your life. You got one life. Nabeel?
And it's like, see, there's this verse in the Quran that says, Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change that which is within themselves.
Mm,
If you want to fix stuff, like everybody's looking for like somebody else to lead them, somebody else to fix them, whether it's Trump or it's Nick Fuentes or it's Anomaly or it's Hotep Jesus or it's Andrew Meyer. Like they're always looking for that one guy. Okay, why aren't you? And then they're very quick to point out, okay, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you do that? Why don't you go do it? Why aren't you, why are you anonymous? Why aren't you um, making a positive change in your community? Why aren't you trying to be your best self? Why aren't you, going to the gym and getting jacked and tan? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, if everybody, imagine a world where every single person worked every single day to become the best version of themselves.
mm.
Okay. And as soon and once they're done with that, they work on the people closest to them, the people around them. Would the world look like it does today?
Mhm.
That's powerful. That's what's led me, politically to the right as well. There's hypocrites, liars, bad people everywhere. But on the left, I live in a city that's mostly run by left-wing people, and you see that ideology drip down because they don't start with themselves, and then they try to kind of hyper control what other people are doing all around the country, all around the world. When I live in a city that's a product of what they're doing, and you see trash building up, if you came to LA in 2008 and you came now, it looks like a third world country, and these people don't even notice or care, where that's kind of the dream. It's like, take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your city. And then if you're just crushing it, you can go off and, help some other people. But that's the fundamental thing that people are lacking. And I think why, when I was younger, I was rebellious. And as I got older, it was people that are God-fearing, God-loving, and religious people that had a set of morals and standards and families that aged better, because it really stands the test of time. And all this propaganda and nonsense is driving people insane. You see some of these before and after pictures of like, chick who goes into college and comes out and it looks like she did meth. I'm not trying to stereotype, but it's like, whoa, like that's what 4 years of a college did to you. But like you said with the homeschooler, I mean, I can't imagine wanting to, until they fix them up, sending someone to a college at this point. They'll come out insane.
For sure.
So we could probably wrap it up. It's been almost 2 hours. It's been a phenomenal conversation. Everything I
Nice.
wanted and more. So I'll give everybody a last word, I guess. Anything you want to say, last question, last word, and then we'll wrap it up. This has been, the ignorant version is a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew. The non-ignorant is Andrew, it's Nabeel, it's Anomaly, just vibing out all across the country, all across the world right now, just giving our perspective. So Andrew, what do you got to say?
Well, the first thing I got to say before we head out, I want each of you to answer my last question. Who do you look to for Christian wisdom, and who do you look to for Muslim wisdom? Who are the teachers that you look at and you say, these people are doing it right? Because people need guidance. I think the three of us, we give people high energy, but I wouldn't call myself a Kabbalist or a spiritual master. So like, who do you guys look to is the question I want you to answer when you guys get your turn on the mic. And then the last thing I'll say is, if I'm putting people down and say, don't follow them, I got to say, who should you follow? So for me, on my website, theandrewmeyer.com, I made a list of the 72 most powerful, most influential, best, whatever, news accounts on Twitter. They just banned number 6 on my list. Carpe Donktum today. So they're going after people on that list, get banned because they're giving you the high energy. Those are the targets. Okay. So you go on my website, theandrewmeyer.com. I got a list of the people I think are the highest energy. And even if I just follow somebody, like I follow Nabeel, that's a good indication somebody is worth listening to. So I say check out that top 72 list on my website. If you want to hear more from me, you can check out my YouTube. I've done a lot of great interviews with people like Anomaly and Luke Rudkowski. And you can check out my book, Don't Tase Me Bro, Real Questions, Fake News, and My Life is a Meme. Thank you so much for hosting this. And Nabeel, it was amazing to meet you and talk to you, brother.
Likewise, man. Likewise.
Yeah, Nabeel, it's on you.
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned that article, I did go through it, and that gave me an idea for putting one together for like Americans or Westerners who want to learn more from actual Islamic scholars who are in the West. A few people come to mind. In New Jersey, there's Dr. Shadi Al-Masri from the New Brunswick Islamic Center. He has a podcast called the Safina Society podcast, if people want to check that out. In Chicago, there's Hamza Maqbool. And all of these people are on Twitter. Like, we can drop the Twitter handles in the show notes or the description. There's Hamza Maqbool in Chicago. On the West Coast, there's Hamza Yusuf and Zaid Shakir. In Texas, there's, for example, Imam Omar Sulaiman, who's a public figure. There's Yasir Qadi. There's so many people. At the University of Washington, there's Jonathan Brown. He's a Muslim convert and an Islamic scholar. So there's a lot of people, a lot of resources that non-Muslims in the West should use as their go-to references that I don't think that they have or they have access to or even know of. For a long time, I've been trying to get some of these actual legitimate authorities onto podcasts like, Joe Rogan or the Rubin Report and things like that. But they're more interested in bringing bringing grifters on,
Yeah. On that note, I guess to answer your question, I've been just going straight to scripture, and I still have a long way to go. I'm not really like an expert or, been in the game for like 20 years. So I'm kind of learning and listening to all sorts of people, though. Really, I like to listen to anybody that's got something to share. But I think especially from what I've heard from mainstream Christians, of course, you have like your feel-good type people like Joel Osteen. He's a nice guy and such. But a lot of these pastors and even politically, so many words have been skewed that, you listen, it's like watching a Trump interview and listening to what people think about Trump. It's like, if you go and read it for yourself, you can usually, for me, it's worked better because I'm reading certain stuff and then I'm thinking Christians that I've heard try to tell me what to think about it. I'm like, I don't see that. I'm not reading the same thing that it says. So, but there's a lot left for me to dive into. Even with, I really want to read the Quran as well and just kind of understand all the texts that people are really reading. The Zohar and the Talmud would take me 10 years, Andrew. So I don't know if I could get through both of those, but we'll see what happens. But I hope at a point to really conquer, to get a feel for everything. On that note, appreciate you guys for coming out. Thank you. That's Andrew, Nabeel. I'll try to post their links. I'll probably post this on a Facebook, let it run live on YouTube, leave it up on YouTube and BitChute. And appreciate you guys. This was fun. And I think, good points from everybody.
Thanks for putting it up, man. Appreciate it. Much love.
No problem.